What's the one thing that you need to know, really you need to master in order to play any game, Battlefield 1 or anything else, more effectively? Well, it might not be what you think. In fact, beyond any tip, any technique, any tool that anyone else suggests, there really truly is only one thing that you absolutely must do to master a game and to become a better player. And that one thing? Practice. Now, I don't just mean playing the game. I don't just mean running around and shooting things and hoping that you get better, because eventually you will, just randomly, just through experience. But I mean deliberate practice. I mean finding a tool or technique that you want to work with, one that you want to master, and doing it on purpose, on a regular basis, when it really doesn't matter, because you need to do this so that when it does matter, you can react with that new tool or technique and be able to get it done in the situation where your life is literally on the line in these games. Now, as an example, I recently watched a few videos from The Broken Machine. He's one of my favorite YouTubers right now, and I'm absolutely loving his tutorials. And in one of his tutorials, he talks about setting up your controller on the PlayStation 4 so that R3, pressing down on the R analog stick, will be your slide and crouch button, and then having the circle button be melee. Now, this is something that I did all the time when I played Call of Duty. I would always have that button configuration. And if you've noticed in the game that I'm playing with Battlefield 1, you'll very often see me accidentally pulling out my melee instead of firing my weapon. And that's kind of the big reason that I started doing that in Call of Duty to begin with, because I'm constantly pressing down too hard on that stick, and it was getting me in trouble. I would try to melee somebody from far away, and they would end up killing me. So I switched that. But when Battlefield 1 first came out, I couldn't find that setting. I couldn't figure out how to make that switch. Maybe it wasn't there, maybe they added it later. Whatever the case was, I got used to having the analog stick down being melee and then circle being crouch. And I wanted to change that after watching this video from The Broken Machine. So what did I do? Well, I went in and changed it, and I frankly failed miserably. It was awful. It was incredibly difficult to play. But I decided that this is something that I really, truly did want to do. So I sat back and thought to myself, okay, what do I need to do to make this work? Well, ultimately, I just need to practice. I need to figure out what it is about my current playstyle that will change based on this button configuration. And that's going to really involve practicing. Just practicing having the crouch button in R3 versus practicing having the melee weapon as the circle button. So I decided to do something very, very explicit here. Instead of just changing it and hoping that I get used to it eventually, I decided to be very, very explicit about my practice. So I played a couple of rounds here this morning with my button configuration set to the default way. And I wanted to do that so that I could get my groove, get into the game, have a few good rounds before I make the explicit choice to switch the controller configuration. And after a few good rounds, I'm thinking, okay, now's the time to switch the controller configuration. So as I'm heading into this next round, I go into the options and I make that switch. I change from the default configuration over to the alternate configuration, which is going to switch R3 and circle. So now R3 is going to be crouch and slide, and circle is going to be melee. But like I said before, I tried this once and it didn't work well, but I wanted to try it again. So what I chose to do is, at the start of this next round, I chose to practice very explicitly this new button configuration. I chose to run around, to bob up and down, and to just get myself in the habit of using R3 as crouch and slide versus using circle as melee. But that certainly doesn't mean that it was easy. I mean, when I'm in these situations where there's no enemies around, oh sure, okay, it's just easy to just think about, okay, I'm going to press R3, or okay, I'm going to press circle. But when it comes down to the situations where it's intense and you need to react and you need to not have to think about what you're doing, well, it's still difficult, and it's going to take a lot of time and effort and a lot of very explicit practice for me to remember which button is which, so that honestly I don't have to remember. I mean, you see right there that as this tank is shooting at me, I'm trying to duck down, but I'm reacting with my melee button because, well, my melee button is what used to be the crouch button. So it's difficult. You get into that situation where you're in the middle of the firefight and you don't remember, you just react. You don't think, you just react. So you have to practice these things in situations where it doesn't matter, and you have to be very explicit about that practice so that when you get to the situation where it does matter, then you can just react with the new button configuration and not have to think about it. And so, as I played throughout this round, I decided to find situations where I could just practice. Running towards these walls, for example, I thought, okay, I need to run to this next bit of cover. I'm going to practice a little bit of my crouching and sliding while I'm doing this. So as I'm looking around these corners, as I'm running towards these next set of walls, I decide to go ahead and practice. And you can see as I'm doing it that it's not really helping me. I mean, honestly, there's no enemies around. I'm not really getting any benefit out of doing this except for the practice element. I'm trying to create that muscle memory inside of my fingers so that when I do get into the situation where I need to duck or I need to melee, I can do it without having to think about it.
Düşman gözcüsü görüldü.
Now, unfortunately, as I'm trying to hunt down this scout over here, I end up in a situation where that practice still has not quite yet paid off. As I'm running up here and I'm crouching, there's a guy that's about to run around the corner, and I kind of got into panic mode. I kind of tried to react, but instead of meleeing him like I wanted to, I ended up spamming R3, which used to be the melee button. And, you know, maybe if I had been able to pull out the melee, I would have got him. But since I tried to spam the R3 button, which was now crouch and slide, I kind of just stood there and let the guy shoot me. It was a little bit embarrassing, honestly. But that's entirely why you need to have explicit practice around these techniques that you're trying to learn. If you don't have that kind of practice, then you're going to end up in these situations for an extended period of time where it just gets really frustrating and you're going to want to go back to your previous button configuration or the previous style of gameplay where you weren't doing whatever that new thing is. And really, this goes so far beyond just changing your button configuration. There may be a specific technique that you want to do with a certain weapon or a certain class, and those kinds of situations, anything that you want to do, those really offer plenty of opportunity for explicit practice again. If you want to get better at, using a scope, well, find situations where you can practice using a scope. If you want to get better at ducking into a tank so that you can recover your health very quickly, like I'm about to do here, well, then you'll do that. If you want to get better at spotting enemies, use the spot button more often. Find situations where you're not in danger, where you don't have to react in order to keep yourself safe, in order to improve the technique or the button configuration or whatever it is that you've been changing in your gameplay. Once you're able to find those places to practice, then you can start getting closer to the real gameplay and start trying to think through it just before you react so that you remember what your new button configuration is, what your new technique is, whatever it is that you happen to be doing. And don't always worry about playing the objective when you're trying to learn something new either. It can be incredibly difficult to play the objective when you change your button configuration because you don't have that muscle memory. It can even be difficult when you're trying to learn a new class or a new weapon. You kind of want to stay on the outside edges while you're practicing these new tools, these new weapons, these new whatever it is. But once you are feeling comfortable with it, with the idea of practice especially, then you can start taking new techniques further and further and further. And by the way, if you are looking for some of the best tips and tricks on how to really improve your game beyond the notion of just practicing to build that muscle memory, head over to the Code Ninja Gaming channel, click on Playlists, and find the best Battlefield 1 tips and tutorials. This is a collection of what I think are some of the best tips and tutorials out there. These are the tutorials that I've watched more than once and have really found a lot of value in them, and they've helped me out significantly. And if you like the content here, if you like the idea of practice, do drop me some love in the comments down below, subscribe to the channel, hit that thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one.